Salutations and welcome to Space-Time Continues. My name is Mary Louise Davey. Let's get going to space. First, let's stop off at the March for Science. March for Science was in LA a couple weeks ago, actually on April 22nd. I was there. I went across the country to go to the LA one because I was out there for business. But I had a tent there and I recorded, I'm sure you saw some of it on Instagram or Twitter or even Facebook, of the people saying why science was important to them. There were various reasons that would start with reasons such as I wouldn't have my grandkids, they were born because of science, or many people are alive because of science. Other people saying I don't believe in science because science is a fact. I don't have to believe in science for science to exist. There is no argument. There were all sorts of people I had the opportunity to record. It was very nice to see people from all walks of life all joining together and saying, yes, I recognize science. I recognize that this is important. And please, if you can't hear the scientists, hear me that you got to listen to the scientists. I mean, very, very cool. And be even cooler if we all continue not only do this push, the science push, because apparently we have to tell people that facts exist, but it's just that we keep staying on top of things and that we keep making things better. Because we'll make America great. Okay? We will. So there have been some questions as to whether or not scientists should advocate for public policy. I mean, they shouldn't, honestly, they shouldn't have to. Given the current climate, pardon the use of the word climate, but do they have an obligation to do so? I think so, if no one else will. Now, obviously, the scientists are the ones with the relevant data and the expertise to contribute to an all-important conversation. So that's great, right? Well, interestingly enough, they're not allowed. They're not permitted to talk to us. Based on, and this is an email sent by President Donald Trump to Trump's administration to officials at the EPA and Department of Agriculture, the punishment for the scientists speaking past the administration and to the people directly is either loss of funding, things of that nature. And worse is the fact that a lot of them have either been completely closed down, if they're working in climate change. I believe, is it Massachusetts? The state is mostly makes their money from that. So actually, you're kind of putting the state in dire straits. So if they're in climate change, that's it, tough, no longer, sorry. But if they're in other areas and they happen to know about that and they try and send out, or any information, science information, they're not allowed and they could lose their funding. So that's not good. The Committee on Science, Space, and Technology is a committee from the House of Representatives. And it presides over, and I have to read this, NASA, the Department of Energy, the EPA, the ATSDR, the NSF, FAA, NOAA, NIST, FEMA, the U.S. Fire Administration, and the USGA. Now, Representative Don Beyer, he's a Democrat from Virginia, is one who has become fed up with the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. And with this in mind, the anti-science nonsense. He has launched a project called Fact Check Project. And it began based off of a climate change meeting that was held on March 29th where Chairman Lamar Smith, a Republican from Texas, brought 3 climate change skeptics. And then guess what? Guess what he brought for the 97%? So his views are represented by 3 climate skeptics. However, the 97%, 98% of scientists that back climate change, those were represented by 1 person. Michael Mann, a climate scientist from Penn State. So rather strange to me that the opinion of 3 can beat out the facts of 1, but okay. There was a tweet sent out by the House of Representatives Science Committee. And this tweet seemed to mock climate alarmists. And this tweet was, another group dealing with climate change in a non-scientific way, along with the other green groups who value politics and emotion over facts. What this referring to was not exactly what it expected, as the tweet was based on a Breitbart tweet, and the Breitbart was based on this. Study shows new insights into global warming trend, research into the temporary slowdown, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what this was referring to was a slowdown in the water temperature and the rising of that between the years of 1998 and 2013. That has since, obviously, it's resumed, but there was just a little temporary slag. And so now apparently we're alarmists. Presently, we're more accustomed than we would prefer, or than I would prefer at least, to alternative facts. So perhaps we should allow the first part to go by, but if we do, where do we come down on this? A hearing title was the following: Affirming Congress, Constitutional Oversight Responsibilities, Subpoena Authority, and Recourse for Failure to Comply with Lawfully Issued Subpoenas. I mean, that's a mouthful. But basically, it was to lend credence to the committee's investigative effort of ExxonMobil. The Attorney General from each of the following states, New York, California, Massachusetts, and the Virgin Islands, looked into stories in Inside Climate News and the Los Angeles Times. Who's heard of that? They had reports in there that expressed how Exxon, while they sure knew the dangers of burning fossil fuels, and they also were working on alternative methods for energy for the future. But wow, they were like confused by all this, I guess. I just want to say, well, I'm an investor in Exxon. Granted, I'm not that big of an investor because I does not have it like that. But they send out a magazine, quarterly, I think it is. And this magazine has an all that Exxon is doing. And it often shows, with regard to climate change, what they're doing and what their future alternative methods of fuel will be and all these things. I mean, it's great. And actually, it's a really nice magazine. But I've always been pleased by that. And that's always been why I've purchased their stock. So I find it amusing that they're getting in trouble for the very same thing. But, okay. So you might be forgiven if you're the CEO of, let's see, what's a good call? Xerox. And you don't believe in climate change, or you don't know much about the scientific method. You might be forgiven if, say, you're on some obscure congressional committee dealing with taxation or waste management. But if you're the chairman of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, if you're Lamar Smith, you should understand how science works, shouldn't you? And I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm saying I haven't seen evidence that would support that. So basically, we all know, or at least he should know, how this all works. Scientists carry out their research. You know, maybe they pour things in beakers, or maybe they have, I don't know, fake lightning going on, or whatever they're doing. But they do their research. They come up with their results. They write up a paper and incorporate those results. Then they submit them for publication. But are they then immediately published and then you get to see what they wrote and you don't, all can debate it for the rest of your life? No. The person, the editor, I don't envy them, the scientific editor then looks at it and says, okay, no, I need, and writes all over the article and say, I need more evidence of this, you got to back this up, we only have 5,000 things to back it up and you need 6,000 things, or whatever. And they send it back to him. And this goes on back and forth between the scientist and the publication, the editor, until it's, a good document and it backs up what was said. And then, and only then, does it get published. And when it gets published, it's in a peer review. And the peers, the other scientists, read it. And now, if it were wrong, the other scientists basically speak back with their own paper on why it's wrong and their evidence to the contrary. So it's a system. It works a certain way. So it's fact. You know, they go through everything. But not rocket science, really. So I'm kind of stuck on how can an individual person on a committee then say, no, I know better. So, okay. There's one other angle I want to cover on this. And the Pope. You know the Pope, right? You know, funny hat. Yeah? Okay. Well, the Pope, who, according to the Catholic faith, so if you're a religious person, if you're a Catholic, you believe him infallibly. I mean, as much as you should be believing scientific fact, you believe the Pope. Okay. So he recognizes the obvious fact that our climate is changing. Now, James Inhofe, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, the chairman of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, actually said the following: "We should be good stewards of the earth God gave us, because climate change science isn't settled." Odd that he invokes God, because God, there is faith, but there's no evidence. And he invokes God, but then he says that climate change, for which there's abundance of evidence, there is no faith. He has no faith. But anyway, the Pope, who is not a scientist, is simply acknowledging that the science is overwhelming and compelling, and so there is a moral obligation to act. So, more food for thought. And then, final point. Science is acceptable by all, except when it comes to climate change. So the current administration accepts and has no problem with going to Mars ahead of schedule, trying to get there faster, trying to get up to the moon, trying to, test the Orion, do all these things, which, hey, that's kind of cool. But nonetheless, do all these things which involve, what do you think rocket science is? Okay. But then they have problems with climate change. I just want to point that out. Now, just so you know, another reason that you should, if you are watching this, indeed, reason you should worry about climate change is our borders. If you're worried about defense, if you're worried about all sorts of things like that, if water's going up, if the oceans are rising, then it's going to be flooding certain areas. So certain people are going to be displaced by this. So then there's going to be refugees. Now, if you're worried that our borders need to be safe, then you must then believe in climate change so you can prepare for the inevitable. Because there's going to be droughts and there's going to be nonstop monsoons, everything. You need to be prepared what you have to do for defense for all these symptoms as a result of the climate change. Anyway, I'm done. Okay. But I'm still going to push for science every day, and you should too. Push for truth. Push for science. So, Space Geeks, when I told you we were going to go to space, here we go. SpaceX has successfully launched its first government satellite into orbit. The NRL-76, a spy satellite, was successfully launched, and the unmanned Falcon 9 rocket came back down and landed successfully there too. Tell you what, let's just sit back and watch a really cool launch.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff of the Falcon 9.
Stage 1 propulsion is not connected. And we have main engine cutoff. And stage separation has been confirmed. And you can see the first stage there flipping back. Use the nitrogen thrusters. And
S1 boost back burn.
And the boost back burn of that first stage. Those white puffs you're seeing are those nitrogen thrusters on board, which we also use for controlling the vehicle in a guided descent back to landing zone 1.
Landing burn startup.
And landing burn has hit startup, and we have ignition. See the landing legs at play in a few seconds.
Late deploy.
And we have touchdown. First stage has landed back at landing zone 1.
And this is us coming right back from space. This is the Air Force's X-37B coming back from a 718 days in space without landing. So really cool, but a top secret mission, so we never really know what it's up to, but alas, it's back before it's gone again to do it again for only know how many days. It had 270 days as its average. However, when it goes up, it's gone for as long as can be. And we don't know much about it, but the patent, the Boeing patent, seems to indicate some solar panels come out and basically could be used while it's in orbit so that it can keep going for these 718-day missions. Gosh, went to space, we came back. Were you tired? Me either. But anyway, let's hear a little bit more about space. Let's hear from Peggy Whitson. She had broken the U.S. record for most time spent in space, received a congratulatory call from President Donald Trump. Peggy, she's currently the ISS commander. She, on the ground here, has been the NASA Astronaut Corps commander or head of. She's spent 534 days, 2 hours, 48 minutes as of the call, which is the most accumulated time for an American in space. However, by the time she comes back down, it'll be, I think, in the neighborhood of 700 days. So, very cool. And thank you, Peggy. Also, Peggy is ecstatic and to the moon about going to Mars. So maybe she'll be on the trip. Maybe we'll all go along. Who knows? Stay tuned. The first ever image of a black hole was captured by a massive telescope. It took 10 nights of astronomers observing the night sky, but they may have gotten a successful image into a black hole, taken at the event horizon, you know, the, I don't know, point of no return, but they're not sure as yet. The massive data collected will take two supercomputers, one in the United States and one in Germany, just to analyze all the data. So when you hear about all these missions that go on but you hear the data like 2 years later or 4 years later, it's something just like this, or like something else that I'm going to close out the show on, the Cassini dive into Saturn, going through the rings. When the credits roll, stay tuned because you can watch some of that. But back to the black hole, data will basically in early 2018 we'll confirm if it's the first ever image of a black hole or not. What it is okay, around the Earth, telescopes all around the Earth. So it all basically made one massive telescope, and they could just leave the lenses open and slowly capture what they were trying to get. So hopefully we captured a black hole. Also, in space news, China and Europe are going to be working together to build a human outpost on the moon. Though they are realizing that there is no exploration with the big price tag attached to all these things without international cooperation. And so I guess they're taking the plunge a little earlier than the rest of the world, which needs to catch up. And they're planning on building a really cool human outpost. And they're looking at what other things they can do together. Save money, expand the technology, use the best of technology or best of science from Europe and the best from China and put it together. There's a lot that can be accomplished if we all can work together. At a time when maybe we're all trying to put up walls, perhaps we need to reach across and work with each other, because space is a big place, and space will require that we work together if we want to accomplish something. And especially if, I wasn't going to cover it, but Stephen Hawking gave a new prediction. Not too many months ago, actually about November, I think, of last year, he said that humans had 1,000 years left on Earth. And now, because the clock has been upped, if you will, to much closer to midnight, we're only got like 100 years left. So he was basically warning us and telling us that we need to work hard on getting to space, or harder, or faster, or both. And we need to be wary because we've only got 100 years, apparently. Well, I don't have 100 years, so sorry. Gonna have to leave you with that one. And they're going to call, back to that, they're going to call it Moon Village. China and Europe's working together. Also, newfound planet. And they say it's the best place ever to search for life. Anyone ever notice that they say that about every planet they find? When they find it, oh, you've got to see this planet. This is really in the habitable zone. This really has the possibility for liquid water and life and all this. They go on, and then they find a new planet, and then, oh, but this planet has everything. Well, this newfound alien planet has everything. So it's around a distant star. It's jumped to the front of the line as far as places where scientists will look for alien life, or at least now they're saying that. I believe, pardon me, yep, it's 40 light years away. So we won't get to find out that information very soon. It's LHC 1140b as in boy. Catchy name, don't you think? Anyway, it's ripe for investigation. Start them up. Come on, let's find out what's going on. And the final story will be plants on Mars, which plants on the moon, plants anywhere. This is a greenhouse system. Now, this greenhouse system mimics the way plant grows here on Earth. Now, this whole system is within, it's an inflatable system. So it could feed astronauts on the way, so on the way to Mars, because they're in the ship for a really long time, or when they get there, or both. It does everything from the watering. You get it there, and you just cover it up with the regolith from whichever planet, be it the moon, or cover up Martian soil, so that it's blocked from the radiation. But inside, it's working fine. Inside, it's got light. It takes light using a system that collects the light on the surface and ships it into that container and fills it with what it needs to grow. So the plants will grow, they'll be edible, be wonderful. So NASA's experimenting with different types of plants, which would grow best in space, which would provide the best food, what's the best varieties, just to help them out on all these future space missions that we know of, and maybe ones that are to 40 light year away planets, who knows. So this all sounds very good. Basically, think of a terrarium. That's how it's a biological sphere. So it's cylindrical, it's about 18 to 18 feet long, 8 feet wide. And once you get to an outer space world, the inflatable greenhouse, as I said, it will be buried. The system's capable of tracking the sunlight and then conveying it to the chamber using fiber optic bundles. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to play you out to Cassini diving down through the rings to Saturn. Hasn't gone for its death yet, but when it does, we'll play you some clips of that as well. That's it, and see you next time on Space Time Continues.